All right. Good morning again, everybody. Merry almost Christmas, and welcome to the traditionally small crowd of almost Christmas at Coast Vineyard. Before we get, I mentioned 2 weeks ago that I was making a trip to Tijuana last weekend in order to just learn more about the crisis situation with people migrating north on our border. And I wanted to share just a little bit about that learning experience with you before getting into the main part of the message. So this was a trip with an organization called Global Immersion, and it really was just an educational trip. We did bring some supplies with us, some sleeping mats and kids' toys, rain ponchos, things that were asked for that would be useful. But mostly it was just an opportunity to learn more about the situation. Another side note is this is not going to be a political rant this morning. I am not an expert on immigration policy, and I don't have the answers. And I would love to be able to propose this is what we should do to solve the problem, and I don't have the answers. All I do have is just sort of what I'm learning and the things that I'm thinking about. And my hope is just as a church community that we would be thinking about these things, that we would be praying about these things, that we would be just engaged and caring about the people who are camped out on our doorstep right now. So among just many, many learning experiences, one crucial thing that I wanted to share with you guys, we heard just a story from a woman who had traveled north with her daughter from Honduras. And I wanted to share a little bit her story with you. She said that she ended up deciding to leave her home after her daughter had been kidnapped, that her daughter was kidnapped and she didn't see her for 3 days. And after 3 days was actually able to get her daughter back. She didn't share what happened to her during those 3 days. All she shared with us is that her daughter's really not doing okay emotionally after that experience. No idea what the details of that situation were, but she got her daughter back, severely traumatized, and after that made plans to leave. And she went north with her daughter to Mexico and applied for asylum in Mexico. And after waiting 4 months and not being able to get asylum in Mexico, she decided to travel north to Tijuana to try to apply for asylum in the U.S. She's currently living in a church that has opened up its doors. It was a church where we went to visit and see what they were doing there. She's currently living there with no hope or expectation of being able to get legal residency in either Mexico or the U.S. And I felt like just hearing her story just made things so much more real to me, just hearing her situation. I have a daughter. I have 3 wonderful children. And I just find myself thinking, wow, if San Diego became a completely unsafe place for them to live, and my daughter was kidnapped, and I got her back 3 days later, and we didn't have any other resources, I guarantee you we would be traveling to Canada on foot right now. And I think that for so many of us, that's the reality of our lives, right? That if we knew that this wasn't a safe place for the people that we care about, for our kids, we would be trying to take them someplace where they could get care. And it's hard to get asylum. You have to be able to prove that you belong to a persecuted people group. So like horrendous gang violence in the place that you came from, for instance, doesn't count as a reason to get asylum. And we are currently turning away. We're processing 40 to 100 applications a day, and we're turning away 78% of those people. When you get turned away, you get deported back to where it is that you started from, which is a very scary prospect for a lot of people. So it might motivate you to want to just stay in Tijuana. But the reality of staying in Tijuana is the likelihood of just spending your life working in one of the maquiladoras, one of the factories that are foreign run. Products that we all consume are made right on the border and brought into the U.S., and the people who work there make $8 to $10 a day. And if you've ever been to Mexico, you know that the cost of living in Mexico is very similar to the cost of living here in San Diego. It's not that different. So you can imagine living on not much more than $8 to $10 a day in our city. So it's just an extremely desperate situation for these people, and just I hope that together as a community we'd be praying for them, and we'd be praying for solutions, praying for wisdom for our nation on how to care for these people. I wanted to share one other aspect of that trip. I also had a chance to attend the 25th annual La Posada Sin Fronteras. The Posada is a traditional Mexican Christmas celebration where Joseph and Mary's search for a place to stay and to have Jesus is reenacted. Historical details aside, it's a reenactment, it's a fictionalized story of Joseph and Mary searching for some place to stay that's traditionally reenacted at Christmas time in Mexico, and it involves a procession down the street, and then the people arrive at the home that's hosting the posada. And then there's a song that's a call back and forth. It's a call and response between like Joseph and this innkeeper as he's asking for lodging. And then eventually the door is opened and all the people come inside for the party, and the last verse is sung together by all of the people. And so in this special Las Posadas celebration on the border, typically is celebrated with people from both sides right at the fence. And the call back and forth happens across the fence rather than through like a family home door. And one thing that struck me while I was there participating in that, typically people participating in these cross-border services that are happening regularly are able to come right up to the fence, and you can touch fingers through the fence. But this time we were not allowed to do that. So we were actually, we were on two sides of what is called in Tijuana the doble muro, the double wall. So it was one fence and people in Tijuana on one side of that fence, and then several yards away, the second fence, and the people in San Diego on the other side of that fence. And I knew that there were people from Coast Vineyard on the other side of the double wall. And I'm up there with my face, just out there and trying to see them. And I'm thinking, I know there's people out there. I know, at least Sam and Amanda Slay are there. And I'm looking, and I'm like, I can't see anybody's face. I can tell there's people over there, but I can't see anybody's face at all. And as we started to sing the song, we couldn't even get in sync with each other, because no matter how loudly people shouted on one side, you could barely hear them on the other side. And it just struck me while I was there, just struggling to see faces of friends on the other side. This sense of distance, this incredible sense of distance, and an incredible just sense of grief. And it made me be able to imagine, what would it be like if my family was separated by this double wall? What would it be like if I wanted to see my family and I couldn't cross that wall, and we couldn't even see each other across the gulf? And once again, I'm not here proposing the answers. I'm not here to propose political policy. I'm not an expert on immigration, but I just want us to take a moment together to acknowledge there's something catastrophically broken here, that we would acknowledge and that we would grieve that we have a broken relationship with our neighbors to the south, and that we would grieve over the fear and the distrust that's there, and that we would long for, and that we would pray for, and that we would think toward and act toward healing. So all of those being said, we're going to move on to just talk about the message this morning. We're doing an Advent season called Humble King. We're talking about imitating the humility of Christ. And the theme for this week is love. When you love someone, you desire to be near them, right? Right now, my heart is so full because all my kids are home. All my kids have come home for the holidays, and there's something that's just, it feels so good just to be with them. I'm filled with joy. And I'm filled with joy partly because I know that they love me back because they came, right? And I'm filled with joy because I actually get to be with them, and that makes me so happy and fulfilled. And yet, many of us are not experiencing that, right? I mean, a lot of us are experiencing that. It's so wonderful to be with family. But a lot of us are experiencing separation. The people that we love are separated from us, from something that feels a lot like the double wall. It's just so far and so hard. And during the holidays, that separation just gnaws in ways that it doesn't during the rest of the year. And if that's you, I'm sorry. That's you. I'm sorry that it's painful to be coming into the holidays with those kind of feelings in your life. And I just pray that God will bring people around you that love you and care for you. Christmas is a time for coming together in love in whatever shape or form is available to us in our circumstances. And as we celebrate the miracle of Jesus' birth this Christmas, we're really celebrating that God put love into action by coming to us, by coming to be with us, to meet us in our brokenness, to meet us in spite of our brokenness, to mend the divide that exists between us and God, and to bring us near to God, to bring us into relationship with God. If you picked up a bulletin on your way in, you'll notice there are not a lot of notes. There are not a whole lot of fill in the blanks on there. There's just one main point, really, that I want to make. And I forgot to show you the pictures. This is the view through the wall. If you can't make out the people on the other side, that's what they looked like to me, too. And this is a closer view. If you still can't make out the people, that's about what I could see. So going back to the big idea, this is the big idea for today. Christmas invites us to imitate Jesus by drawing near to each other in love, breaking down walls, bridging divides, and pursuing unity with each other. And we're going to look today at a passage that's quoted over and over and over again at Christmas time. The prophet Isaiah describes Jesus as a light dawning on a world of darkness. And so we're going to read Isaiah 9:2. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to look at 1 John in order to elaborate on that prophecy and talk a little bit about what does it mean for light to be coming into the world. So I'm going to pray for us and we'll take a look at the scriptures. I want to take a moment specifically to pray for the situation on our border and also to pray for our service. So Lord, I just want to lift up just all of the desperate people who are waiting and wondering at our border. God, I ask that you would care for them and that you would love them and that you would provide them with the things that they need. Would you change their lives? God, I ask for us, just as a nation, that we would be generous, that we would be compassionate and welcoming. And Lord, would you heal the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico? Would you bring wholeness to families that are separated by the wall between us? Also want to ask, Lord, that you would bring wholeness and healing to families both there and here that are separated by death. Would you bring wholeness and healing to families that are separated by strife? Would you bring love and grace and goodness into the lives of everyone here and everyone far away who are lonely? And God, also, would you just meet us today as we read your word, as we learn more about you and strive to become like you. And pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So Isaiah 9:2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. So this is a verse that's just quoted at Christmas time, year after year. But I want to take a minute just to think about, what does it really mean? I think it's an incredibly emotionally powerful image. When I read this, I imagine the desolation of a whole world with no light, a world that's cold and confusing because you can't see. And I imagine just the heavy depression that settles over me when I don't see much sunlight. Other people get sort of down when the sun doesn't shine. I know for me that I experience an emotional dip in the wintertime, so I wouldn't be good to live in like Iceland or Alaska or places where it's dark for long periods of time. And sometimes even just in the evenings, sometimes just at night, I just find that my outlook becomes more pessimistic. My thinking gets less rational. It's embarrassing to admit, I'm almost 50. I'm afraid of the dark. It's just scary when the lights are off and you can't see. And I've learned that I shouldn't make decisions, when it's dark out, because I'm not seeing rightly during those times. And this is an image of a sunrise, of actually the very first sunrise ever, lighting up the world. And it's a glorious image of color coming in and warmth coming in, and an entirely new way of looking at the world. So these are the emotions that are present. But what does it mean? What does it mean for us to walk in light instead of to walk in darkness? And we're going to look at several verses from 1 John because 1 John picks up this theme, and we're going to see that the great light that's rising on the world is Jesus, that the dawn of the world is his coming, that Jesus' coming is actually the coming of God's love into the world, and that we move from darkness into light as we participate in the love of Jesus and as we share that love with each other. John says of Jesus coming, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. So Jesus is the light, and he's coming longing to be received. And by receiving him, we enter into familial relationship with God. And going on, John explains that this cannot be done without loving one another. He says, the person loving a brother and sister stays in the light, and there is nothing in the light that causes a person to stumble. But the person who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and lives in the darkness and doesn't know where to go because the darkness blinds the eyes. Thinking about just what it's like to be stuck in the dark where you can't see. I get up to go to the bathroom a lot in the middle of the night. Usually I have just complete sense of exactly where I'm going because you've navigated your own bedroom in the dark so many times that your body just knows where to go automatically. But do you ever just suddenly get really disoriented for no reason? And like all of a sudden this time it's not working and you're just not quite exactly where you thought you were? That happens to me every once in a while, and I'll just walk right into the wall. Just boom, where did that wall come from? Where am I? And then I'm really confused. I don't know where I am. I don't know. Maybe you guys are less clumsy than I am, but has that ever happened to you? Just walk right into the wall. Like, what am I doing? And then it's a little bit scary. Like I'm groping around. Where is the light switch? Because I don't even know where I am anymore, and I'm not sure if I'm bleeding, and what is going on here? But sharing in the love of Jesus actually lights our path. If we don't engage the love of Jesus by loving other people, then we don't see rightly. We remain lost and confused. We remain stumbling around in the dark. But if we focus on loving each other, we see clearly. We know where to place our feet, and we won't fall. So it's by actively doing love that we learn how to live. We learn to live by actively acting out love. Yeah. And we can read the Bible all we want. We can go to church all we want. We can pray all we want. But according to the scriptures, if we don't love our neighbors, we can't claim to know God. It's interesting, we have this popular saying that love is blind. But it's fascinating to me that the Bible teaches the exact opposite of that. The Bible teaches that love sees clearly, that it's not love that is blind, but in fact it's actually hate that is blind. Have you ever been so angry that you said something incredibly mean that you really, really didn't mean? It's like all of a sudden that other person's humanity disappears. Normally you would care about that person's feelings. Normally you would never say something like that, right? But the anger takes over and it's blinding. And for a moment, we don't see what we're doing. We don't see what we're saying. We don't see the hurt that's going to be caused by the things that we do in moments of hate and fear and distrust. And this same fear and distrust, it causes us to turn a blind eye to people around us who are in need. And a crucial thing here is that hate separates us not just from each other, but it separates from God. We aren't able to be close to God when we don't love one another because that person right in front of us is made in God's image. And when we turn our hearts away from people, we turn our hearts away from the God who made them, the God that's reflected in them. John 1:4-20 says, if we say we love God, yet hate a brother or sister, we are liars. For if we do not love a fellow believer whom we have seen, we cannot love God, whom we have not seen. See, in hate, we can't see what we're doing and we can't see where we're going. We've shut out the light and we've become blind to people and blind to God. We can't physically see God, but we can see God's representatives. We can see people made in God's image, and we begin loving God by loving them. And as we do, the scriptures teach us that light comes into our lives. As we love those people, light comes into our lives. We start to know God. We see rightly, and we see what to do. And we feel the warmth and the joy of the sun rising on our world. I want to talk for just a minute about just what does this look like on a practical level? It looks like us imitating Jesus and bridging the gulf that separates us from other people. In the very popular bridge diagram that people have often used over the years to talk about the gospel, that it is our sin that separates us from God. And what Jesus did was come to close the huge gulf that exists between us and God. A gulf that, I'm thinking how big I felt like that gulf was between the two halves of the service on the border, and thinking, oh my goodness, the gulf between us and God is even so much bigger than that. And in this bridge diagram, we talk about how Jesus closed that gap by coming to us. He closed the great chasm that existed between us and God that was caused by our sin. And he did that by coming to us, ultimately by dying on the cross. But the first step was coming to be with us. The first step was coming to meet us right in the middle of our sin. God made the first move. Humanity had made ourselves God's enemies. God owed us nothing. And yet in Jesus, God made himself our friend and offered us love. One more verse from 1 John. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. Now, we don't have the ability to do the exact same thing that Jesus did. We cannot actually incarnate ourselves as infants in some other part of the world or something like that, right? And we don't even have the independent, short-term ability to tear down the double wall that we were talking about earlier that separates San Diego and Tijuana, though we can continue to engage the issues in constructive ways. Side note, engaging the issues in constructive ways means research, means thinking and praying, means learning what other people are thinking. It doesn't mean engaging in the ongoing internet shouting match. All that does is multiply more and more hate. But constructive dialogue means learning as much as we can and rubbing up close to one another, learning what other people think, trying to figure out how to solve the problems that present themselves to us. And we can pray for wholeness in people's lives. We can pray for international relations. And we can love the person who's right in front of us right now. We can love the person in our own lives with whom we have a broken relationship. Even if we have to make the first move. Even if we feel like they don't really deserve it. And just a little example, while I was at the Posada service, I actually ran into someone with whom I have a broken relationship. And it was that really awkward feeling. Do you encounter someone that you don't have a good relationship with, and there's like, oh no, that person is here. This is going to be so awkward. Are we going to talk to each other? Are we not going to talk? Would I have even come if I had known that this person had this awkward situation is going to be here? Yeah, I know. Don't judge me. I know we've all been there. That feeling like, oh no. And I'm thinking, okay, I should just go over and say hi. The right thing to do here is to just go over and say hello to this person. And so I kind of steeled myself up to do it, and I walked over toward the person, and they were just like, vroom, and just walked away like I wasn't even there. And I was like, oh no. Yep, this is going to be just as awkward as I thought. Why do they have to be like that? Why can't they just be normal? And I'm feeling really bad. And then a couple hours later, I accidentally walked over near this person. I was doing something else. I was not my good intentions. I have to admit that it wasn't in any way whatsoever my good intentions. I accidentally walked right past them on my way to do something else. And the person turned to me and said, "Hi." So then I have to decide whether or not did they change their mind when they just like this? Did they decide later that that wasn't the right thing to do and they changed their mind and then they wanted to talk to me? Or was it all just my imagination and maybe they didn't see me in the first place and I was just being judgmental? I don't know. All I know is I walked past and they said hi. And that was all it took. Just one hi. And I turned and I gave them a hug. And we said just a couple words, and that was it. I mean, I can't say that our relationship is fixed. I can't say that we talked through everything that's ever divided us and we've solved everything and now we're good with each other. But it was a step, right? It was one step. Walking over close, by accident in this case. Speaking, reaching out, just making one small first step to begin, to move toward each other. And I just want to ask you guys this morning, what relationships are broken in your life? And what might be just one tiny little step that you could take to heal that relationship? Just a tiny one, a small first step. Not how will you solve the whole problem, but just what's a small step that you could take toward that person to heal that relationship? I want to acknowledge that in some cases that probably wouldn't be appropriate. I think there's a few of us who have people in our lives we have broken relationships with that actually wouldn't appreciate hearing from us. And if that's the case, I'm not advocating that you put pressure on a situation that it wouldn't be appropriate for you to reach out. And if that's you, you know who you are. But in most cases, most of our situations, a small step means a lot, is a really, really big deal. And how can you make the first move, even in a small way? All month we've been reading from Philippians chapter 2. And today we read, and this is the last scripture we're going to read, today we read this passage. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort in his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking on this verse today. I just want to make just a really short, simple paraphrase. Paul, in this passage, is urging the church in Philippi, if Jesus coming in love to be united with you means anything to you at all, if you've grasped any part of this message, if you've been blessed in any way by what God has done for you, then come together in love. Set aside your differences, bridge the gaps, tear down the walls, mend the relationships, go to each other in the same way that Jesus came to you. And in this way, we walk in the light. In this way, we come to see clearly. And in this way, we come to know God. That's about all I have to say this morning. I wanted to end with the Posada song that we sang at the border last Saturday. And we're not going to sing it, actually. We're just going to read it. I didn't want to... Jason and I debated, would it be a good idea to try to teach everybody a new song in Spanish? And we decided that would just be too hard to try to teach everybody a new song in Spanish today, 2 days before Christmas. So what we're going to do is we're going to read it, and we're going to read it in English. But the reason I wanted to read this song is because I think it wonderfully illustrates exactly what we've been talking about today, the problem of trying to love God without loving brothers and sisters. So as we read this song together, I want you to think about how are the speakers in this song trying to love God without loving the human beings that are made in God's image. And a couple notes before we do it. We're bridging sort of Protestantism in the U.S. and popular Catholicism in Mexico. Some things are going to seem different that you're not used to. So a couple things just to note as we come into this song. One is you'll hear about Mary's purity as a virgin. And I want to just take a minute to defend the position that has traditionally been taught at Coast, that the idea that Mary was a virgin when Jesus was born is that the conception was a miracle, that Jesus was conceived miraculously rather than through the ordinary methods for conception. It has nothing to do with Mary's status as exceptionally pure. We don't believe that sex is in any way unholy or that you're more pure if you're a virgin than you would be if you're not. The virgin birth is about miraculous conception, not about the purity of Mary. Something else you'll notice that will look unfamiliar is you'll see Mary called the Queen of Heaven. And we don't usually elevate Mary in that way. But one way to think about this is, Mary is the mother of the king of the universe, right? Jesus is the king of the universe. Mary is his mother. And so the old world language for this would be queen mother. That Mary is the queen mother because she has this queen-like status because she's the mother of the king. So you can think about it that way, as her as the king's mother. So those things aside, just for our sensibilities, what we're engaging here is an incredibly valuable tradition of role play that includes both the positive characters and the negative characters in the story. And that's something that we don't do a lot of. Adults in sort of, in Vineyard or other kind of U.S. Protestant churches don't do a lot of role playing. And if we do, we usually like to act out the good stuff, right? We want to put ourselves in the role of the good guys. But this is a tradition of role-playing both the positive characters and events and the negative characters and events. And I think it's really powerful because it's a moment of acknowledging our sin. It's a moment where we recognize and admit to the hardness of our hearts, which I think is a prerequisite to softening our hearts. Admitting that our hearts are hard is a beginning place for beginning to make our hearts soft, and I think that that's really powerful. So we're gonna end the message by reading this song, and so I'm gonna ask all of you guys to stand up with me. So if you can stand up where you are. Now the people who are on the left side of the room, and we're going to divide the room right down the middle. There's 6 chairs, so these 3 chairs are on this side, and these 3 chairs are on that side, and we're going to just divide straight down the center of the room. So the people who are on the left, you're going to read out the things that Joseph says, and the people on the right, you're going to read out the things that the innkeeper says. And Joseph starts, so we're going to start in just a minute. And then another thing, just because I know this is super unfamiliar, like this is going to feel weird. And I think the temptation is going to be like really quiet and kind of wait and see if your neighbor is doing it. I'll do it if my neighbor is doing it, but I'm not going to do it. And I'm definitely going to be quieter than my neighbor. So, and I just want to let's just take a second to acknowledge this is not going to be fun or powerful if we chicken out. So we got to pretend to be Mexican Catholics here, okay? We're going to engage. Okay, and also remember in this story, the 2 people are shouting at each other through a closed door. So it's not going to be very realistic if you're not loud enough that somebody would hear you inside a house or outside a house while you're inside and they're outside, right? So I want to encourage you just to speak out with some boldness. So the words are up here. The people outside are the people on this side of the room. The people inside, did I get that right? Is that what I said before? Yes. The people outside are on this side of the room. The people inside are on this side of the room. And we're gonna go through, and then when we get to the last verse, we're gonna all read it together. So, all right, people outside, are you guys with me? Okay. In the name of heaven, I ask you for shelter, for my beloved wife can go no further. You might be a rogue. Not being inhuman. Show some charity. God in heaven will reward you. You may go now and don't bother us anymore. And all together. Enter, holy pilgrims. Pilgrims, receive this corner. Not this poor dwelling, but my heart. Tonight is for joy, for pleasure and rejoicing. For tonight we will give lodging to the mother of the God Son. When we read that together, I'm struck by just the human hardness. You know, the hardness. Oh, there's a stranger at my door. You know, no, I'm not responsible for you, and I'm not willing to take responsibility for. Not willing to engage with you. And then this moment of realizing, oh, it's Jesus at my door. Oh, well, I would want to host Jesus. I would want to welcome Jesus into my home. And what Jesus has told us is when we welcome one another, when we welcome the stranger, when we welcome the person who is in need, we actually do welcome Jesus. And so just as we engage Christmas this year, let's be people who welcome Jesus. I want to leave us just with a challenge here. We're going to close with a song of worship in just a moment, as we usually do, but I want to leave us with a challenge, and that's, how would you rewrite the story of that song in your life? How would you want that song to play out in your life, both this Christmas and always? And just as we engage this closing song, a question to ask yourself: where is a place in my life this Christmas that I can open the door to love, or that I can humbly go first to the door and knock? Where can I be a part of reconciliation and healing? Where can I be a part of inviting and engaging? So let's sing our closing song together. I invite the prayer ministry team to come on up. We have a time at the end of each service just to pray for anyone who's in need, who desires to receive prayer. And I just want to call out a couple of just specific groups that might want to come up and get prayer today. One is just if there's separation in your family, if you're one of those people who, gosh, the holidays are hard because there's a big divide there, and it feels distant and it feels lonely, and you're feeling anxious about the coming week. We'd just love to pray that God would come and that God would meet you and to care for you. Also, maybe you're really comfortable. Maybe you're one of those people that's just getting ready to spend a wonderful week enjoying family. Where can you reach out to somebody who might be feeling excluded and lonely? Where can you make an invitation? Where can you open the door and reach out to someone else? Where can you bring love and light into somebody else's life? There's a couple of specific things that just came up as we were praying before the service this morning. Grace had a word where she said she felt like she was seeing the potter forming the clay. We often talk about God forming us like a potter forms clay, so that God is the potter and that we're the clay, and that God is making us and molding us, as we just sang. And then she was pointing out that clay then has to be fired. And she was saying, I think that there's some people who just feel like they're in the fire, like God is forming you, but what it feels like is just that you're burning up. And it feels sort of overwhelming and painful and terrifying. And if that's you, we just want to pray that God would bring perspective, and that God would bring the good purposes that He has for you, and that you would experience relief and that you would experience joy. And just right as she was speaking that out, I was reminded of a moment from my very early childhood. This was on a family trip that we took when I was just really small. And I didn't even know where the memory came from. I've had this memory just floating around in the back of my mind all my life. And for many, many years, I had no idea where it came from. And it was this image of my family staying overnight in a place with a bunch of hippie-looking people with long hair and guitars who sang songs, and we ate donuts. So I remember donuts and long-haired people with guitars singing, and that it seemed that we had spent the night there. And for a while, I started to wonder, just somehow at one point in adulthood, I started to think about this experience and just wonder about it. Like, did this even happen? Like, is this just a dream I had? Did this happen? Because I don't remember people like this in my parents' lives. And so one day I just asked my mom, I said, I have this really vague snippet of memory. I don't know where it goes. I don't remember an event like this, and I don't recall that we knew any people like this when I was growing up. So who could those people have been? And my mom said, I can't believe that you remember that. She said, you were 2 years old, and we were on a road trip across the country. We drove through Kansas in the wintertime, and there was a horrendous snowstorm, and we went off the road. And it turned out that several other travelers had also gone off the road in this crazy snowstorm, and a local church opened up its doors to stranded travelers. And they sang us worship songs, and they fed us donuts. We spent the night there. So I can't believe that you remembered that, because you were so small. And I've been thinking, I didn't even know where it went. I couldn't even place it. But my whole life, I've been carrying around a sense of warmth related to that moment. That something wonderful happened that day, and I didn't even know what it was. And it was kind of exciting to realize, oh my goodness, it was the hospitality of Christians. It was songs about Jesus, and I didn't remember or probably even notice any of the words at the time. But it had meant so much to me that it stuck with me my whole life, even if I had been only 2 years old and didn't know what was happening. And when I thought about that memory, I thought, the things that we do matter. The really small little things that we do matter. Somebody might carry around for the whole rest of their lives the memory that one day you showed kindness to them. And I think so often we feel like we can't do that much, like we don't make that much of a difference. And I just want to encourage us right now. The tiniest little thing that we do might mean the world to someone for the rest of their lives. So if that resonates with you, where is God calling you to reach out? Where is God calling you to show love? So I want to just invite anybody up who would like to receive prayer. If you feel a need just for God to love on you in the place where you're at right now, or you feel God tugging you toward generosity, come up and get prayer and meet with God about that. And we're going to close our service by holding hands across the aisle as we usually do. So if you can take the hands of people who are standing near you. Lord, I just want to thank you so much for the love of this community. Just looking around this room right now, I'm reminded of that early childhood memory and thinking, this is a community like that. Lord, would you make us a community like that? Would you make us a community full of warmth and love and grace? Would you bless us just as we go from here to live out your love in everything that we do and everything you say? And God, would you bless our Christmas as we go into that this week? We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful holidays. Come on up if you'd like to receive prayer. And we'll see you next week. Well, actually, we'll see you tomorrow night.